When I was in my fourth decade, I learned something surprising about myself. I grew up in a home where money was scarce, and so we had to watch everything that we spent. And then as I became older, in my 20s and 30s, money was also pretty tight, but I didn't fret much about it until I lost my job. And then I became frantic. So I took the first job that came along in my job search, and it was a job at an accounting firm, Ernst & Young. When I found myself in that firm, I realized that I was in a whole brand new world that I had never inhabited before, and that the amount of money that I made was twice as much as I had ever made before. And so I began to spend more and more. As it turns out, I actually started spending more than I was actually making, and that's when I began to wake up with the problem and realized that I was trapped in a web of spending. I always wanted more and more. And that is when I became aware of that something, that surprising something that I didn't know before. Because I had grown up in a poor home and I had lived as sort of a middle-class person up until this point, I didn't think I would ever be a slave to money, ever. Boy, was I wrong about that. It didn't take very long for me to be exposed to what was, to me, relative wealth before I realized that I couldn't live with it very well. And so after a few years of being in that environment where I was making more and more and I was spending more and more, I left. And it was just in time, too. After some years now, I have now found my place in this church and in ministry. And this is the best time of my life because I am paid to be kind and generous and to serve you and to give myself away. What a bargain. Well, today I'm going to present you with two ways of living in the world. And the first way is illustrated in our scripture reading for this morning. And it can be found in Luke chapter 12, beginning with verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all of my grain and all of my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax. Eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." The story of the rich farmer, known as the rich fool, is a story about accumulating and consuming. And that is the story that we're opening up with today, the first way of living. Now, when Jesus calls somebody rich, it's important to know that this is not a compliment. Of course, you knew fool wasn't a compliment, I'm sure. But the word rich is not either, because a person who is rich is a person who has accumulated more than they actually need. And such a person is not in the character of God, because what does God do? God accumulates nothing. God gives away everything, and God is described as one who fills the poor with good things and sends the rich away empty. So this man and his wealth was the very antithesis to the character of God. He was also a fool. We find a reference to that word in Psalm 14. Fools say in their heart, "There is no God." They are abominable. There is no good within them. So the rich fool, our farmer, had been bestowed upon by God many, many wonderfully abundant harvests. He had stored his riches in barns, and he had had years of wonderful harvests that he had stored up. But then he came upon a problem. He had a superabundant year, a year with a bumper crop, and he had no more room in his barns. And so he asked himself, what am I going to do? I have no place to put all of this. And he came up with his answer: bigger barns. Now, there were other options. He could have given away some of his riches to God. He could have shared some of his food with the hungry people that surrounded him. He could have also helped out farmers who were having lean years. But you notice in the scripture that none of these options even appeared in his mind. He didn't even consider them because he didn't even think of them. This fool said in his heart, I will build bigger barns. And this is the stance, the approach to living that all of us in some form are trapped in today. It is an approach to consuming the world. We are not really able to escape from that approach to life. If we stop consuming more and more each year, our economy would fail. Even if we just consumed the same amount this year that we did last year, our economy would fail because our economy is based on growth. And if we don't continue to consume more and more, our economy will not grow. What if we were at peace with all of our neighbors? Imagine that for just a moment. If we did not have to declare wars and protect ourselves and all of the rest, then there would be no profit in making arms. And so all the people that are employed, and there are millions and millions of them, that are employed to build up weapons for our defense system, those millions of people would be out of work. Well, even imagine next Christmas, if you decided that you were not going to go out and buy Christmas gifts this year, that you were going to make your Christmas gifts from things that are inside your own house, which meant that you wouldn't have to go to the store and buy anything new. Black Friday would be black, indeed, if that were to happen and everyone were to do it. The approach to consuming the world is so much a part of us, so much in our blood, we don't even know it's there. But that's the first approach to living in the world that I present with you today. The second approach can be found in a story that a Hasidic rabbi told his granddaughter. It's a wonderful story, and it can be found in the book Becoming Wise by Krista Tippett. The story is called the beginning of the world, or the birthday of the world. And it is a story that describes why Jews teach their children and each other that it is their job not to consume the world, but to repair the world. So listen to this wonderful story that the rabbi told. In the beginning, there was only the holy darkness, the source of all light. Then, in a moment, the holy darkness broke open, and 1,000 things rushed out of it as a huge ray of light. But then there was an accident, and the huge ray of light was shattered into thousands and thousands of fragments of light. And those fragments of light fell upon every person, every place, every event in our world, where they remain hidden until this very day. Those of us who repair the world are people who find the light in those events, in those people, and within themselves, because they know the light is there and they lift it up. And so the event and the person is blessed, because what was hidden as a fragment of light in them is now shared, and it is a light that shatters the darkness. This is a job that we do not do alone. It is something that is for everyone, and it is the reason why the human race came into being. All people who have ever been born, people who are alive today, and people who will be born in days and days ahead, share with us in this job of repairing the world, because we all have a fragment of that light. And as the Gospel of John describes it, it's the true light that enlightens everyone. And so those of us whose task is to repair the world will find that hidden light within us and raise it up, and find that hidden light within others and within events and within people, and raise it up. Those of us who repair the world may not feel that we are in any way qualified to be doing such a terribly important job. But actually, what is required is all of us, even our imperfections and the things that we are unsure of within ourselves, are all part of what we bring and all necessary when we shine the light, the fragment of light that has been left in our care. That is how the wholeness of the world will be restored. That is how we repair the world. And that is the second way to live within our world. Let's take a look at the two stories for a moment that we've heard this morning. In the first story of the rich fool, you'll notice that the rich fool trusted no one. The rich fool, in fact, had no room in his life to even trust God. He didn't feel he needed to trust God. Why would that be necessary? Because he already had big barns full of grain, and he needed even bigger barns full of grain, and he felt that he had supplied all of that by himself. He hadn't received any help from God, and he hadn't received any help from anyone else. So he did not need to trust in anyone. Those of us who are healers of the world understand that we have to trust God, because if we do not, we will not have the hope and the faith necessary to walk into this world where the blood of our brothers and sisters is shed each and every day. If we do not trust God and the light that God has buried deep within us, we would not even be able to make the journey. So the first step in the second way to be in the world is to trust. And the next step is to recognize that we need each other. We are all connected. If you look at the rich fool, you'll notice that he wasn't connected to anyone. He was alone. He didn't even have anyone to leave his inheritance to. He had done it all by himself. And at the end of the day, he had no one to share his riches with. But for all of us who are healers of the world, we realize that we are connected to everything. We're connected to each other. We're connected to events far away in other lands. We are even connected to the creation itself that provides us sustenance enough to go into each and every day. It is these vital connections that help us to heal the world. When President Reagan died and his daughter eulogized him at his funeral, she did not bring up his resume. She told a story about a time when her father buried a baby goldfish that had died. She told that story, and then she described what kind of man her father was. And it was that small act of sacrifice and love that made all the difference to her. Such a small thing, and yet it was his light, his hidden bit of light that he brought to her in those moments that she will never forget. We are healers of the world, dispelling the darkness, shining our light, giving away what God has given to us. This is what it means to be rich toward God.